Let's open it up to the question and answer, and what we'll do, if you have a specific question for a specific person, please note that. Otherwise, you can just throw that question up there, and whoever wants to talk about it can do that. So if you'll raise your hand, I'll just recognize you right through.
I have a question for Dave. If the Republicans take or the state of Texas takes the map directly to the circuit court in D.C., is there a way that the Justice Department can inject themselves into that process?
Oh, yes. Essentially, the defendant would be the Justice Department. So the litigation would be the state of Texas versus the United States, represented by the Justice Department. And that litigation, I assume, would be a fairly serious litigation, both in terms of time and effort.
So the advantage of the state going to the circuit is not as big as maybe some people have represented.
Well, I don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say the standard is the same whether you go to the Department of Justice or the court. It's still retrogression. So, for our perspective, we think it's a pretty even. We don't think the advantage is really that much. I do think the legislation that Deese was pointing out, Phil King, was going to make every single preclearance have to go to the DC. And that's just a huge cost and a waste of time and energy. And so you're talking about you want to change a precinct polling site from across the street, and you got to go up and go litigate it. So he, I think, modified the bill to limit it down a little bit. But initially, we were like, this is just a big waste of money because we don't really think it's a big difference in terms of the legal standard. It's just a question of whether you think it's better to be in front of judges or be in front of the bureaucrats at the DOJ.
You keep in mind that because of the Bush years, the District of Columbia judges are probably fairly conservative. So, that would be why they would seek to go there. But again, it would be very difficult, complex litigation by all means. And I don't think wouldn't get decided for years. We may be operating under an interim plans for a decade while they litigate. That's it.
When did we finish the last round? 2005.
It took 5 years last time, so it takes that long.
This is more of a comment. Anybody can comment if they want. I saw a presentation a few weeks ago about this, and it kind of illustrated the difficulty of doing this even without prejudice. Now, I'll accept on face value what you've said about perhaps our legislators aren't setting aside political interest for this. But let's say you have a hypothetical group that is setting aside political interest, and you're trying to divide up a hypothetical county of 1 million people, and your district size is 200,000 people. If you have a concentration of Democratic voters that tend to live close to the center of this county, and the Republican voters tend to vote out in the suburbs, then there are the example I saw was 2 ways of drawing this. One of them took the circle out of the middle, and that was a safe Democratic district, and the other 4 were safe Republican districts. Well, but that's following. You could ignore all the voting issues and say, well, that's this is a geographically sane way of doing it, right? So the other geographically sane way of doing it is just to divide it up into 5 pie sections evenly, and in that case, you have 4 Democratic safe seats and 1 Republican safe seat. So, taking all the prejudice out of it, this is a difficult process to do. And that also shows you the power of redistricting. The League of Women Voters is out to register voters to get public participation, but that can all be undone in one fell swoop with just the way a map is drawn, even with honest intentions. So that was illustrative to me that this is a very challenging process, even with the best intentions. It's complicated even with the best intentions, and when you put some of the lesser intentions in, it gets even more complicated.
In the old days, in the counties, I sued a bunch of East Texas counties in the old days, they reapportioned on the basis of road mileage. So you'd go out to Nacogdoches County, and those commissioners, their basis was not population, but they evened up how much mileage they had to take care of. That was a very practical way to do things. You don't offend the Constitution, but this is very practical.
I have 2 comments on your comment. One is, you know, we think of democracy as voters choosing their representatives. What redistricting is about is representatives choosing their voters. That's what really happens in redistricting, and that's one of the frustrations. Senator Jeff Wentworth and Representative Mark Strama have each introduced legislations to take redistricting out of the legislature's hands and put it in some impartial commission, you know, kind of civic leaders, smart people who know how to operate these map software, and see if they can then get them to draw more impartial districts. I don't know if, I don't think those bills have a prayer, so, but I mean, but you know, there is some discussion of that. What Wentworth did that I think is a bit smart is he said, well, let's just do that with the congressional districts. Because of course the last thing that a House member or senator wants to do is turn loose of the process for his or her district. So he said, let's just do it for the congressional districts. And I think he at least got a hearing on it last year. But it's obviously, I mean, you know, and there are several states that do this already, and it seems to work just fine in those states.
We don't know yet. Okay.
Well, California, that's how California is going to do it this time around, and I tell you that the process, you know, selecting those impartial people was pretty advanced. It was a really difficult process, trying to find people who had never been appointed, weren't politically involved, knew something about it, and they finally found a couple of, you know, a 10 panel, and then they found out how much work is going to be involved, and they were like, why are we doing this? And they quit the commission. So it isn't the easiest process, and to get minorities to serve on it, you know, who are, you know, have families and work, you know, it's really tough. So we'll see how California turns out. We know when Arizona did it last time around, we ended up having voting rights violations. So I think it is hard, even for nonpartisan.
We got a computer to do it.
And
I'd like to ask a question of the speaker from MALDEF. The district that Tom DeLay designed went all the way down from Austin to the border of Mexico.
That's right.
And so he was trying to get rid of Lloyd Doggett. What happened, though, was that there were Latinos here in Austin who knew about Lloyd Doggett's record, and they went down to the border and campaigned for Lloyd Doggett. And so just because he's not Latino doesn't mean he can't represent all the interests, all the things that Latinos care about.
That's right.
So I like your second choice of a man.
Well, what I was going to say is when we draw these districts, it's not about electing a Latino. It's about electing a candidate of choice. So Henry Bonilla, who was Latino, was never the Latino candidate of choice in that district. And in fact, they tried to add more Hill Country Anglos and took out the Latinos from Webb County in the last round on that delayed district map. And that was what they ended up getting them in trouble in the Voting Rights Act in the Supreme Court. In order to offset that, they tried to draw the Doggett skinny district from Austin all the way to the Valley. And it turned out Lloyd Doggett was the Latino candidate of choice, and he beat a Latino candidate. I think that with the San Antonio to Austin, which isn't as lengthy or as skinny, it's a lot more compact, he would be very much probably the Latino candidate of choice and could run a very competitive district and win that district because he is so popular. Among the Latino community, he's very strong in immigration, he's very strong on Latino issues. I have a picture of him on my wall, I admit it. I like the guy. So, but I do think he could probably win that district, or at least be competitive.
yes, sir.
Yeah, speaking of Travis County Commissioner's District, what would have to happen as far as growth for them to have to increase the number of commissioners? Is that possible?
That, it would require enough growth to have a constitutional amendment, because it's the Texas Constitution that says that every commissioner's court shall be composed of 4 commissioners. So that would require, and that applies to all 254 counties. So of course we have counties like Loving County that I think cracked the 50 number in their population in this census that have 4 county commissioners in, and then we have Travis County.
So the number of people, the representative is not a concern. The number that each commissioner represents is not a concern.
Oh, it is a concern within Travis County. Within Travis County, the 4 commissioners have to represent approximately equal sized districts.
What I'm saying is if it doubled, they would still just take.
That's correct. They would just have
like
twice
the city
as many.
of Austin.
Right.
Like the city of Austin. it doesn't make any difference about the number,
Right.
the population growth.
So for instance, in Harris County, you have county commissioner precincts that have, 700,000 or 800,000 people in them.
Okay.
And in Brewster County, you have county commissioner precincts that have 800 people in them.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's, but all the precincts within Travis County will be
Right.
approximately the same number of people in them. And if I can just add to that, Bruce being here reminds me that we do have 5 constable precincts and JP precincts in Charles County. Harris County, I think, has 7. So 8, is it? So I think that's at the discretion of the Commissioner's Court, depending on workloads and all that stuff. They can create additional precincts, and in fact, those don't all have to be the same size. So one of the challenges that our redistricting consultant is going to advise the court on is whether or how to fine-tune the constable and JP precincts at the same time they're doing the commissioner's precincts. But the commissioner's precincts are subject to the Voting Rights Act requirements in terms of one man, one vote, in terms of all the criteria that have been listed here today. Not so the constable and JP
Well,
precincts.
wait, I'd be a little cautious on that.
Well,
Am I
I would be a little cautious,
Maybe
I'm
oversimplifying?
oversimplifying the law
Okay.
perhaps there.
I'm not the legal expert on the panel.
Judy? Casey, do you have a feel for, are there major demographic changes in Travis County that you could foresee our commissioners' borders changing significantly?
I don't know how significant it'll be. The biggest demographic shift in Travis County is that if you think of basically the Commissioners Court last time drew a map that basically started in South Austin and went along 360 all the way up to the county line, and all of that, all of Lake Travis, all the area north of it, Leander, Cedar Park, Jonestown, Lago Vista, and everything south of it, Bee Cave, all the way down into what we think of South Austin, Manchac, Leanna is in Precinct 3. Well, that area has grown gangbusters. So that district is going to have to shrink in size, and the other districts are going to have to increase in size some. I have no idea what that'll look like, but obviously Precinct 3, which had the biggest land mass, also now has the most people.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask this to Luis Figueroa. On the congressional district maps, we only talked about here about the one going to San Antonio. Is there others in here that you know that are going to have a congressional district, say in Dallas, Houston, that give a opportunity for a minority to get elected in those?
Right, so Texas, because of the growth of Texas, was the huge winner among the states, gaining 4 new congressional districts, which has the advantage of one, now the congressional districts are a little smaller than they were before. So they're, which say ideal size is 600,000, as opposed to our Senate, which are just 811, which are just huge. So when you have a little bit smaller district, it's a little bit easier to draw Latino majority districts. So our Latino task force, which is comprised of the statewide Latino organizations, submitted a map that drew 2 new ones. One in Dallas, which is a combination of a district from Dallas and Fort Worth. And there was tremendous testimony from both Dallas and Fort Worth saying that they wanted a new district there. I think that's probably the least controversial one. Then we drew the 2 South Texas configurations, one with that Austin and San Antonio one we talked about, and then the other option, which was goes up from the valley and goes into San Antonio. And so not quite all the way into Austin. It's not as skinny and as bad as the Lay one, but certainly still a long strip that would also elect a Latino candidate of choice. And then the other one that people are looking at is in Houston, which if you look at Gene Green's district, my boss Nina calls it a dragon. And if you take a part of the dragon, you can draw an additional, keep one Latino district and then draw another what we call coalition district, which is with the Latinos, African American, Asians, and other whites who cross over would elect a minority candidate, but it wouldn't necessarily be a Latino majority district. So our coalition today met, and we're going to release the Houston probably next week and suggest that as an alternative. So those are the options for Latinos. There's obviously going to be a fourth district, and it probably will comprise of suburbs that will largely be probably a Republican majority district. So those are some of the options out there, and we drew options for them to show. Look, if you want to comply with the Voting Rights Act, this is how you do it, and if you don't, you're going to end up getting sued.
Yes.
I would like to know if it's possible as yet to project from the, vast increase in mixed race, mixed ethnicity, mixed race population, at what point it's going to be unnecessary to worry about the ethnicity of their representative. You talked about that somewhat, like Lloyd Doggett is fine with the Latinos, and I'm sure it'll be even less of a consideration when you have so many mixed race people, which are getting more and more and more as we sit here and talk.
Well, no, the question is...
This census compared to the one 10 years ago, what was your difference in mixed race?
Yeah, the question is always going to be, is it polarization in the voting? I mean, that's the legal trigger. So when there's no longer polarization in the voting, then there's no longer... Yeah, I mean, that's... So, and we're still a step away from that millennial sort of notion.
I think we're quite a while away. You look at the polarization, even in the primary. You look at Victor Carrillo, who ran for railroad commissioner in the Republican primary. He was the incumbent, had a ton of money, was the only one that was known, was clearly the candidate that everyone was as far as the establishment was supporting, and he ran against an Anglo and got by an unknown Anglo and got trounced. And it was clearly the last name, Carrillo, was considered to be a Latino last name, and the racial polarization across the state was so extreme, even in the Republican primary, that he ended up getting trounced. And we run election after election, and we find racially polarized voting pretty much across the board. It's pretty rare. Actually, Austin is actually one of the few places you do not find racially polarized voting. And maybe that's because of the gentleman's agreement in the city council races, where you have a couple of that. But I also think that you have had some successful Latino candidates, the mayor, former mayor, Senator Barrientos, other candidates. But across the state, you find very wide polarization, and I think we're away from the mixed ethnicities from changing that dynamic very much.
That situation was somewhat triggered by the Republican sweep of everything because of...
But that was in the
That was
Republican primary.
That's the one we're talking about.
That was just the Republican
that's
primary.
right, yeah.
Let me add too, you mentioned Austin being progressive but not being bigger of that. That's not necessarily the case. It depends on what you represent.
Yeah.
For example, if you're an African American here and you represent certain interests, I can give a big name to a fellow named Eric Mitchell and others as well. Depends on who told you to step on. So that's not quite true.
Yeah.
If African Americans here become more independent and voice their own concerns, then you see a whole different kind of reaction. We only get embraced when we're playing the status quo game. That's why this current at-large system says, we pick your leadership. You know, they can be black or brown, but we're going to select them for you. So the whole idea of what you stand for politically is a whole other conversation. But on your first comment about mixed race, there appears to be very correlation between mixed race and politics. You can be mixed race to be very, very conservative. So I don't think that's any indicator of how we're going to be political in this country, this state, because, as you said earlier, this state's very polarized across the board. You can examine the vote and see that. So I wouldn't indicate that somehow being mixed race is going to lessen. In fact, from what I've seen, it has very little impact.
I think it would lessen the desire for an African American, versus or a Latino or an Anglo. I mean, if you've got a family that's half Latino and half Anglo, let's say, they don't really care whether their representative is Latino or Anglo. That's what I'm talking about.
I see your point.
But you do raise the issue which we haven't talked about, and really ought to be talking about, and that is single-member districts for the City Council of Austin. Now that is an issue which is right present for us. And Austin, I think, is the largest city in the United States that elects its city council at large. And is that correct?
That's correct.
And this obviously has to change, and it is an issue which I represent the League of Women Voters in Waco. Where I grew up.
Yes.
The league hired me to sue the city of Waco, and I established single-member districts for the city of Waco. And here Austin is sitting 30 years later or 25 years later, still electing at large.
Well,
and this is really something that has to change. Right?
The League of Women Voters has been testifying for a mixed system since the 70s.
Yes, right.
For the city of Austin, at-large and single-member district, because we feel that's the best representation for the citizens.
But why hasn't it passed? It's been brought up several times, right?
Two lawsuits got lost, number one.
Because we couldn't prove the racially polarized voter.
And the one referendum went down. I think I'm right.
I think that's more.
Nancy?
Nelson had a very good op-ed in the paper this morning. So why don't you comment? I mean, I agree with you, and I agree with what the mayor is doing. I think the League of Women Voters will agree with you, too. Why don't you talk about that a little?
I think that's a very simple answer to your question about why is Austin still the way it is. I think if you look at the political establishment and the money in this city, that's what it wanted. I mean, this changed in the first place, and former Councilman Lewis gave an article earlier about Palmer Overton talking about this a long, long, long time ago. You see, we can sometimes forget that the folks who run city politics make these decisions. I think now what I'm sensing is they've decided that we need to change the system. So when they say, look, you know what, it doesn't look good anymore. I'm just being frank. It doesn't look good anymore. The city's growing too much now. African Americans are all over the city of Austin. It's not just East Austin. East Austin's lost its population. We're now in Pflugerville, Manuel Dale Valley. When it becomes an embarrassment, they say, well, look, let's get together. Let's get out front, and we can always direct the change. The only problem is right now, under the current proposal, which is 621, 6 single-member districts, 2 at large, and the mayor is at large, it's not going to pass that muster with the Department of Justice. So they have to come back and increase the number of seats. But the good thing is now, what I'm sensing is that they've decided they've got to make the change. The bad news is, when they make that change themselves, they control the process. So we've got to be very much aware of what they want and why they're doing it, and make sure that we design a system that benefits the whole city in our interests particular. And that's my concern, is when they say it's time to change, that's both good and bad for us. Unless we control the outcome, we got to really mobilize to make sure we pick the right system that ensures a certain kind of representation.
Oh, excuse me, the fellow that you were talking about who lost the Republican primary, that was probably due not so much to the Republican sweep, but to the conservative Republican sweep. And so that's what polarized that as well.
Diane, did you have a question?
Yes, we're going to have to be working toward a close in a few minutes, and I want to take just a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about these maps, and I hope that you've all picked up this. There was an allusion to this earlier in the discussion, and this is an example of one of the maps that I want to show you. This page is actually just a screen print from this. And if you go down here and highlight this with the viewer, you will get to the screen that you can select. If you go up here to select plans, and we'll select a base plan. Here are various congressional district plans. This is the original. And these are all just have been submitted by individuals or organizations. There is not one out. And this one right here to the left on the board, right behind Francis of the whole state, that is one that was submitted by A.J. Pate, who has submitted principles of how redistricting might be done. And this is an example of how congressional districting could be done, following those principles and totally ignoring where any incumbent lives. So that's one way it can be done. Over here, you'll see various state of education, state board of education ones. And I selected one there, I was going to try to move in a little bit more. And we have, on the board over there, we have, I believe the one that the House has voted out. The Senate this morning voted out a different map, and that is down here, that is number 118, I believe. That, 120, I'm sorry, is the one that was recommended by the Senate, and that will be debated on the floor. And then we get down to the many, many, many House. These are all the plans that have been submitted for the House, and that is why right down in this corner, it shows you that as of this moment, they started at 12 o'clock today, and they're still debating amendments. So this is, and there's other kinds of resources on here. There's publications and all kinds of things that you can get to. This is the Texas Redistricting site.
I'd like to take one more question to the panel. Did you have one, sir?
Yeah, well, I was going to comment on Mr. Nelson's comments. I agree with him. The gentleman's agreement certainly handpicks which black and which Mexican American runs in that particular race, and then you're stuck with that. There's nothing more to it than that. But like geographical representation that we've been trying to get across since 2006, we've been promised that we're going to get it on the next ballot. Okay? The mayor, when he ran, we definitely gave him the business about being the mayor that would finally get it there. If his plan goes as it is now, it'll be 2012 in order to get it there. Most of us would agree that would be fair. But it's not fair when they came around and had a committee back 2 years ago. And yet the city council passed a resolution not to go forward with it. Since then, just to cap it off, Senator Wentworth has proposed legislation. It failed in 2009. It's up again this time, mandating the city to go to geographical representations. It has 6. We've been following it from the League of United Latin American Citizens very closely. We've been testifying on it. A lot of you would agree that, hey, look, we don't want the legislature to mandate us. But if Jim Crowism is alive and well here in the city of Austin, then it's time to end it. It's time for the Texas legislature to do the legislative business that they're there to do, and that is to legislate to the counties. They do it for the counties if they have to. They mandate them. Everything has to go through them. If we have our senator from Senatorial District 14 agree on it, it would fly in colors. We would have geographical representation today, and we would be able to go ahead and later on go ahead and go to 6, 8, 10, 12, or whatever amount we wanted to get for fair representation, as Mr. Linder is talking about. We won't do it when the charter revision is going to be done and we're going to have light rail attached to it, or any other attachment to it. If it's a yes, no on single-member districts, we all would vote for it, but we don't. I'll give you a good example. I came before the CEC in Travis County with the resolution. On a show of hands, we lost. We went even. On a yes or no vote, we won. It's that simple. If I said yes, everybody else said yes in the room. But if you said a show of hands, if she raised her hand, everybody else would raise their hand in her favor, and the minorities would lose. Because there's such few minorities on the CEC. And what I'm talking about, the County Executive Committee and the Democratic. So, folks, let me tell you, it's well overdue. geographical representations that we've presented is well overdue. And I applaud anybody that has stood up before, Anglo or otherwise, on single member districts.
Thank you, sir. But does the panel have any comments on this man's statement?
Well, the problem is, I think lurking there obviously is, to me at least, I've always believed in single-member districts, straight up. I don't, this business of mixed plans, I'm not a fan of it. I don't know why. What in the world are you doing except saving the establishment a couple of given seats? That's the way I see that's about. So that you start proposing plans like that, they get voted down by people like me who think that's a cop-out.
Got purists.
Yeah.
Got the purists.
Well, they call it a hybrid system.
I know what they call it. That's why I don't like it.
Okay.
Like San Antonio has straight up single member districts. Whereas Houston has a combination of
Yeah.
single member districts and at-large
The
districts.
MALDEF supports single member districts, not a hybrid as well, but you know, if there's politics at work, we understand.
Yeah, right.
I do want to mention, just by way of information, that I have copies of the redistricting map for Travis County for the House members. So if you're interested in where you end up in the new House map, there was a change adopted on the floor today where they swapped out a couple districts, and that's not, or a couple precincts, that's not indicated on this map. But if you want to just kind of take a placemat home or something like that, kind of get your, kids.
Will it be
and
obsolete
put
tomorrow?
color on it. It is already obsolete. It is already obsolete tonight. But for anybody that wants to know about your House legislative districts, I made a bunch of copies.
Before I thank the panel, I want to make one announcement. There is an election on May the 14th this session on municipalities and ISDs throughout the county. The Austin Legal Women Voters Guide, which is a nonpartisan, we don't endorse candidates, but it's very helpful. It is on our website right now. It will be published in the Austin American Statesman on this Sunday. So look for the supplement in this Sunday's paper. If you're not a subscriber, please go out and buy one. And it will also, at that time, be on the Austin American Statesman website also. So the Austin League does voters guides for every election, has done that for as long as I know, as far as they've been in existence since 1919. So that is our service to the community. And I would like to thank all of the panel members, Mr. Figueroa, Mr. Richards, Mr. Eckstein, and Mr. Linder. Thank you so much.